Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Pause for Popcorn. If you're a fan, then welcome back. And if you're a first timer, let me give you the rundown. Pause for Popcorn is a movie and television podcast branch of SDGC. That's our parent podcast that talks about all things video games every Thursday. Every single one of these podcasts is archived on our YouTube channel, and you can also find us on audio platforms like SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple iTunes, and more. So let's kick things off. Once again, welcome my co-host Justin, as well as our guests John, Dio, and Matty. How many times have you guys seen Endgame now?
Only once.
Twice.
Just the one time. I saw it right at 6 on opening night. So
I'm going again this weekend.
You're going a third time.
I am. I absolutely am.
The second time, so I've never seen anything like the reaction to this in Infinity War. I've seen lively audiences, but like when people like actually break out into a full-on like cheer in the middle of a movie and it's deafening, like so I love that experience the first time, but it's nice seeing it a second time with a little bit where you can like actually hear some of the stuff that you missed.
Yeah, like in my theater, there was parts where people were cheering, and then something else happened that they wanted to cheer for, and then something else happened they wanted to cheer for. So it was like, guys, let me at least take it in for a second.
Yeah. No. I almost blew Vicky's eardrums out. We were there on Thursday night. And spoiler alert, talking about this movie, but when Kat picked up the hammer, I stood up and lost my shit. It was like I literally lost my shit.
I almost lost my mind at that point. Like, that was like one of those points where I almost...
So that's a good time to clarify, even though we already dove into it. So this is a spoiler podcast, as John just alluded to. But honestly, yeah, the Russo Bros officially declared today, end of the spoiler ban. If you haven't seen this movie, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. Go out and see it. New Spider-Man trailer's out. That spoils this movie. Everyone's already spoiled the movie. You're already spoiled. So, like, yeah. We're going to talk about every aspect of the movie.
There's no way anybody is watching or listening to this without having seen the movie.
I really hope not.
I just can't believe that Han Solo killed Harry Potter. Like, I'm still reeling from that one, man. The realization that, when Harry collected all the Triwizard gems, and assembled them in the Infinity Cup. It blew my mind. I've been waiting for that moment for so long.
So dumb. So we'll start with just some initial thoughts. I guess we won't necessarily go in turns. We can just kind of dive into a discussion on it. What did you guys think of the movie? I fucking loved it. I don't think it was perfect. It was a little bit messy, but I feel like it was as satisfying as I ever could have imagined it would be.
Yeah, I think satisfying is probably like the biggest takeaway from this movie, because there's so many things that could have gone off the rails or could have, been left dangling that just didn't work. And I feel like all of the main points in this movie worked. There was a lot of really satisfying character payoffs that have been set up for a very long time. And obviously that big final battle is insane. Like, I want to know how much money that scene alone cost, because
they've already made it back, I guarantee.
Well, I mean, paychecks for everyone in that scene were like $300 million.
Like, I gotta know how much it costs some of those people that are literally in like a shot.
Like Evangeline Lilly, she's in it for like 2 minutes.
I don't even think she has lines. I think she just lays next to Scott and they look at each other.
Drax doesn't have any lines. Mantis doesn't have any lines.
Yeah, there's a bunch of people that don't say anything.
Just screams.
Yeah.
And like, also several of those actors were like in interviews talking about how intense and crazy of a shoot it was. It's like, you were on set for like maybe an afternoon.
Yeah. Well,
overall, like they really did do a good job of making this feel like an ending instead of just like another hook for an MCU movie, which I thought was, part of the reason why it was very satisfying. So I was quite pleased with it.
It's my favorite movie of all time. As somebody like, I'm the oldest one here. I'm 38 years old, and I've been reading comic books literally since I was old enough to read. So I've read every major Marvel storyline. I've been there the entire time. I could tell you anything you need to know about the Marvel universe. It's my second passion's next to video games. I love comics. And so this is something that I've been waiting to see, like quite literally my entire life. And seeing there being there in the theater and seeing, not just, literally, not just, Captain America and Iron Man on a page, but like no fucking shit, Captain America and Iron Man. It was just like, this was the MCU as a whole is something that's simply unprecedented in the not just the American film industry, but the international film industry. And this kind of 11-year experiment, they needed this thing needed to pay off in a major way. And for me, it delivered with both barrels on all 8 cylinders. This was the movie that I needed. This was the perfect way to kind of put a bow on these first 3 phases of the MCU. Nothing is perfect, obviously, but this is about as close as it comes to just like, Marvel cinematic nirvana for me. I loved almost everything about this film.
I think one of the biggest strengths of Endgame is that we compare the MCU a lot to TV shows because of the structure of it, how long the MCU as a whole is. But I felt that Endgame biggest strength is that it really, like you said, it really feels like a season finale. So it has a lot of space to breathe. The first and second act are really big compared to the third act. So it really feels like the greatest season finale ever.
It almost really does feel like the ending of a television series, doesn't it, Dio?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matty, what did you think?
Well, like Justin was saying, like so much could have gone wrong in this movie alone, but so much could have gone wrong over the last 11 years, and I'm shocked that it didn't. Because I had times, I think it was around like 2014 when like Guardians of the Galaxy Winter Soldier came out. Like I picked the worst time to be negative about the MCU, but I was like, they're not going to deliver on any of this. Like this is not going to pay off. And I walked out of that theater and I was like, oh my God, like nobody's ever going to be able to set something up like that and pay it off like that ever again.
It's
it makes the DCEU look so much paler in comparison.
Well, yeah, and I think it just kind of.
I mean, that's already kind of been given up on.
So,
Yeah.
But like, I think it underscores the problem with the DCEU, whatever they call it. Like, they tried to get to the Justice League within like 3 years.
Too quick. Too quick.
Yeah, and it's like, no, you gotta give it time.
Yeah, they just wanted to rush in and get the Avengers money without setting up the Avengers, basically.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it this way, right? Like, and I think they've realized that with some of their, like with what they're doing with Aquaman and Wonder Woman and things like that. I don't want to make this into like a DC show, but I think they've realized that what Marvel did is incredibly hard to do, and that's not even a knock against DC. This is hard to do, and I think probably most studios would have failed at it. It's amazing, like you guys consider, so much could have gone wrong. The worst we got was Incredible Hulk and Thor: The Dark World. Wait, or if you ask most people,
those aren't even bad movies.
No, there's not a bad movie in the MCU. There's run of the mill average films, but
and I'll defend to the death the art design and style of Thor: Dark World. I think that movie looks awesome.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It looks very different from anything else.
Which is another thing this movie did is like I don't like Age of Ultron. I know Jeff, John, I think maybe Justin.
We all speak the truth, man. We all speak the truth.
That movie's boring. But
I haven't seen it in a while.
You're boring.
Yeah.
Me neither.
But Endgame made Age of Ultron have more emotional weight because of what Tony's talking about in the beginning. Like I said, we need the shield, and then it makes Thor: The Dark World matter, which I have a feeling so many people skipped in their marathon lead up to Endgame, but now they're like, oh, I should have watched that one.
Yeah.
And so I guess now we're going to move into the strengths, and we'll talk about some of the weaknesses of the film. But like you guys touched on, one of the strengths is its characters. Now we've gotten to know them over so long. And another thing I think is amazing, not just in Endgame, but over the course of all these movies, we've had different directors, different writers, characters show up in one another's movies. It's amazing how consistent the characters are written and portrayed when you consider that you have, Marcus and McFeely writing Endgame or Infinity War, and the Guardians feel the same as they do when James Gunn wrote them in Guardians of the Galaxy. It's it would be very easy to get one version of Captain America and another version of Captain America, but I think the collaboration between all the different directors and writers, and Feige probably running that show, really helped maintain that cohesiveness, and that helped Endgame be as successful as it was.
And I think that's also a real testament to the casting choices, because some of these characters are so well cast that even over so many movies, you get that consistency because it is the same people, but they also are people that really get what these characters are about, on top of having writers that collaborate well together. I saw a screen cap today of some old Variety article making fun of Marvel for casting some no-name Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth.
That guy will never be a success.
And he's honestly, I think it took him a few movies, but he has so come into that role and really brought his own personality and take on Thor that's even different from the comics and stuff, that I think people have become really attached to. And then, obviously Evans is Captain America, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, everybody else, the casting was so on point that I don't think that they would have been able to pull this off if they didn't have the people, in these roles on as well as the creative team that they had.
Yeah,
Jeff, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, it's really rare to get an actor or actress to own a role so much that you just cannot envision anyone else in that role. It doesn't happen too often. I would say out of the X-Men movies, the only one really for me is Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Other people did well, but I could see
Patrick Stewart too.
Yeah, but the fact is, in the MCU, if I go through the list of characters and movies, every one of them has stepped up so much, from the smaller characters to the bigger ones, that it's really hard for me. I cannot see anyone but Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. I can't. Each one of these, even a newcomer Benedict Cumberbatch is Strange. I just can't envision anyone else in these roles, and that's again the biggest strength of Endgame. And I was surprised. I thought this would be a lot more action-packed. I thought it would be a huge part 2 of the war that Infinity War set up. And I was really surprised and pleased that it doubled down on all of these characters that we're attached to and gave each of them their moment and helped develop and even end their relationships with one another, and just stay true to everything that they worked for over the years. That was its biggest strength to me.
I think obviously, the fact that the movie just didn't completely collapse at the seams under the weight of everything that was involved in it is a success right there. But I feel that the biggest success of the movie was the ending, and I'm not talking about the big final battle, which is probably one of the most glorious things I've ever seen put on cinema, but the way that they wrapped up the stories of both Iron Man and Captain America. This was the only way that Tony, what really spoke to me as somebody who suffers from depression and chronic, just constant anxiety, was the fact that Tony had been suffering from the same thing ever since the attack on New York in 2012. And this was something like the end game, as he said it, that up there, that's the end game. Of course, the title of the movie is a direct callback to that. And this is something that you saw the effects. He suffered the effects of this in Iron Man 3. He was having flashbacks. He was suffering from PTSD. He was having panic attacks over this. And there was a line in Infinity War where Thanos said, Stark, and he says, "You know me?" And he says, "You're not the only one cursed with knowledge." And then Tony says, "My only curse is you." Thanos has been cursing Tony for the past 7 years. And now at the end, when Pepper says, we're going to be okay, you can rest now. That to me, and that's when Tony finally died. That's when he finally let go. He said, "Okay, you guys got it now. I can finally rest." And that combined with the very heartfelt, touching way they wrapped up Cap's story, giving him that dance with Peggy, letting him live out his life with her. I thought that those were the perfect endings for those characters. I I feel the way that the movie handled finality, not just with Tony's death, but with Black Widow's death, was done really well. All those sacrifices meant something in the end.
Deal? How'd you feel?
I don't know. I mean, I agree with most of what John said, but I don't know if I agree totally with Natasha or Black Widow's death sacrifice. It felt, I mean, out of all the characters, either her or Clint doing the sacrifice are who really made sense to do it, but I'm not sure the way it was done was really okay. I mean, how do I explain? The way she tries to convince Clint to do it, being, I don't know, almost being frigid. I didn't like that.
Yeah, I was not a huge fan of that death.
That's like, that scene was weird to me, just in general. Like, it felt like that scene, like, especially like when they're fighting and stuff. Like, the more I think about it, like, it almost feels like that scene was like, that fight was like the writers going back and forth deciding which one of them was going to get killed off. Like, they kind of felt like two characters that they don't know what to do with from here on out. And it was like almost like flipping a coin kind of thing.
Like, I didn't have an issue with Black Widow sacrificing herself. I felt like that was a fitting end to her arc. My issue was the fact that she didn't get a funeral. I'm like, what about Black Widow? Like, Hulk got mad and threw a bench, but that's it. Like why doesn't she get a funeral?
Well,
like,
I mean, they still had some things to take care of, and I'm sure. But they even,
like, afterward, like, you could,
they even talk about they ask if she had any family or friends, and they're like, it's us. So I think they probably mourned her privately in their own way. But I agree, when Tony gets this big send off, to not really show or acknowledge one of the original Avengers is a little. It was all just a little strange how they handled it. Matty, did you want to elaborate any more on why you didn't like it?
I think her arc, like, within this movie is good. Like, her being so despondent after the 5 years and just, like, trying to keep the Avengers going because it's all she knows. Her sacrificing herself makes sense within this movie. But I think, like, looking at her arc over the last however many movies since Iron Man 2, like, it does just feel like they didn't know what to do with her. And they're like, well, one of them's got to die. Let's kill the woman because Hawkeye's getting a TV show. Like...
Yeah, and I feel like the Russos...
She's still getting a movie that is interesting.
Yeah, she is. But, I mean, it's probably going to be a prequel.
I'm sure it is.
I mean, everybody already assumed that was going to be, a prequel of her, assassin days. So.
Yeah, I really liked what the Russos did with her in Winter Soldier and Civil War, and it's too bad that she didn't get her movie sooner. I mean, not that every character needs their own solo movie, but I feel like, given how much we've been hinted at her backstory and how little she's been given time to develop in these other movies, she really could have used something to flesh her out a bit more.
And I think that's also why, like, that whole Soulstone scene didn't quite work for me, because like, they haven't done enough to make me care about either character. Like, I'm just like, oh, okay, one of, like, either Hawkeye or Widow are going to die in this scene. Like, it wasn't like, like in some of the other, like, especially in, and this is kind of like goes for both Infinity War and Endgame. Like, they do a really good job of making you, like, freak out and be really, like, worried, like, who's going to make it out of this scene and who isn't. And that scene, I'm just like, okay, well, one of them's not going to make it out, kind of thing.
Her death would have landed, like, so much harder emotionally if we had even just one solo movie, just kind of, like, fleshing her out and giving her, like, some semblance of an arc before this. Because before this, it's been, like, her romance with Bruce, her helping Cap, the stuff in Age of Ultron, but, like, none of that's been, like, a connective thing over the years. It's just kind of like its own discrete thing each movie.
Can we all agree, though, that some of the absolute strongest parts in the movie were the revisiting older Marvel films like Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor 2?
America's ass.
That is America's ass. Like, those were some, for me, those were some of the strongest parts in the movie.
Oh my god.
We got to see scenes that we normally like what happened after the Avengers beat Loki in Avengers Tower. Like seeing characters like, Brock Rumlow and Alexander Pierce, like that was really fucking cool.
The the Hail Hydra
Oh,
scene,
It's amazing.
That was
with
a
the with the
great-
callback to
Amazing.
the
to Secret Empire.
yeah, like well, and Winter Soldier, like like two at the
Yeah.
same time. Like that
Yeah.
scene was super good.
But
The-
no, I'm
also-
referencing the fact that Captain
Yeah.
America said Hell Hydra, which is like
No,
last
yeah,
year-
no, I
yeah.
know what you mean. Like,
Okay,
but
gotcha,
then,
okay.
But then it was also initially framed like the
Yeah,
elevator fight from
the elevator scene.
Yeah, no, I got you. But like it wrapped both of those up, and then like the scene with Thor and his mom, I thought it was really really good. Like that was one of my favorite parts of this movie, and I think it did a really good job of like continuing Thor's arc that has kind of started in Ragnarok, where he's starting to doubt his own abilities, and like when he sees his mom, and then when he gets Mjolnir back, and like he's like almost in tears, like I'm still worthy.
Despite
Like-
all his depression and PTSD, that for somebody like me, that one hit home as well.
Like that scene was really good.
Really touching.
And
Yeah.
like it did a good job of like we mentioned earlier, recontextualizing a movie that people kind of had written off being important to the MCU. Like kind of added that in. So I really enjoyed those callback things. Like they were very very fan servicey, but very well done.
Yeah, I thought I agree with everything you said about Thor. I do feel like they missed a little bit on him in this movie. I agree. The scene with his mom was great. I felt like the beer gags went on a little bit too long, like a little bit too much. Like the first time they showed him in the hut, I'm like, okay, like hilarious. He's like a mess. He's just completely given up. But then they kind of keep hitting it, and I really tried to give it a second chance in the second viewing.
When they were in Asgard and he was like, where are you going? He's like, oh, my father's got.
Yeah, that's when I was
I was like, okay, we get it. Like he likes beer, but I mean, come on,
I like
like
beer.
yeah.
See, to me that actually kind of made it go a step further than like, oh, Thor's just kind of partying to ignore stuff, and it's like, oh, Thor's actually an alcoholic now. Like
Yeah,
I don't know. Like I get why people don't.
I get what you're
some
saying, but
of stuff.
it's not framed as being serious like that. Like it's not shown like we're supposed to empathize with him. It's played for laughs, and I feel like it was just played one too many times. But
Yeah,
I mean,
That's fair.
yeah,
There were like moments where they would play it serious, but it was like sandwiched between two jokes. So like the serious moment didn't have time to breathe before they were like kicking you back into another joke about his weight or or like using his sadness as a joke. Like I'm like of two minds with the Thor stuff. I really like that they didn't have him like get shredded in the last battle and like he kept the weight.
I was waiting
but
for
he,
that.
like-
Yeah,
So
but
was
he, like,
I.
owned
Yeah.
it. Like he owned like who he is now. I like that. But there were just way too many moments where they were like, haha, Thor's big now, haha, like he's mumbling and falling asleep.
I get that, but for me, like, it works because it was, Thor was acting goofy because MCU Thor is kind of a goofy guy, but like, you could see everybody else, like, was sad for him and stuff. Like, I do get the complaints with that, but it really worked for me. And also, as somebody that, has been through similar stuff like that, it was like even the stuff that was played for jokes I thought wasn't mean-spirited. It was more just playing with Thor's personality in this situation.
The two things I disliked the most was Rhodey and Rocket like kind of shitting on him about it, like with the cheese whiz and the jokes. Like I thought they could have cut that out because like the first encounter with him and Bruce is like so understanding and calm and like, look, I know, but we need your help. And then for two of his friends to just be like kind of not very empathetic towards him.
I just speaking of Bruce, I just wanted to give Professor Hulk a hug like every time I saw him.
I didn't realize he said dab in the like when he did
yeah. Before we move on to Hulk, the last thing I want to say on Thor was I don't know if it was intentional, but I feel like in the last battle he was channeling Odin a little bit with the longer hair and the beard. And maybe even the bigger stature. Yeah. And I think that's maybe why it bothered me so much, because I felt like if they just did an initial joke and then just played it straight with a bigger Thor through the whole film, like, why can't we have a main superhero that's a little bit heavier, that's not, like, traditionally cut?
he looked like an actual Viking warrior.
Yeah, and
I hope Thick Thor stays.
He won't. He won't.
He's not going to. I mean, it's Hemsworth. Like we all know how Hemsworth is built.
Yeah.
I like Thick Thor.
Although, can we all I feel like there was a missed opportunity for a post-credit scene where him and Quill were on the Bowflex, like on the Milano. Like I feel like there was a missed opportunity there.
Well, that's gonna be
that's
like
the opening scene of Guardians
3, right?
They're both committing. They got some dumbbells. They got the Bowflex. I'm gonna commit.
How did you all feel about Captain Marvel in this movie?
I was surprised she didn't have a bigger role.
She didn't have a very large role. And I've got some questions about how she knew where Tony and Nebula. Like she's like, I mean, was that blind luck or was she?
At the end of Captain Marvel in the post-credits scene, she shows up at Avengers HQ, and I'm assuming they told her where they were. And
Pepper was there waiting, so I think she came back and then they sent her out, and then they were just waiting.
Yeah, that part was unclear because I mean, like, it's weird to put so much weight on a post-credit scene from the previous movie. That was not set up at all.
Like at first when I saw it, I just assumed that it was a scene that got. I mean, it probably was a scene that got cut because this is a 3-hour movie, and they probably still had to leave stuff on the floor. But that I am pretty sure that's what that was.
I'll let everyone else chime in, but I on the first viewing I was a little disappointed, and I don't know if this was me or the fan base or Marvel themselves, but I felt like there was this weird aura around Captain Marvel that she was going to be this big savior and the star of Endgame and her movie. But looking back at it, like, I don't know where that really came from, and it makes sense. This is a send-off to the original Avengers. I like that they didn't let her suddenly show up at the last minute. She's presumably going to have plenty of moments to shine over the next 10 years. And they managed to keep the focus, and it made sense. What is she going to do when they're doing the time heist? She has no place there. It made sense for her to not be present for most of the movie. Her return made sense. It made sense. She was about to own Thanos until he ripped the Power Stone off the gauntlet. So that part made sense on why he was able to counter her. So that kind of explains away the power gap there. So
that was a baller move, by the way. When he pulled the Power Stone out, I was like, okay, Thanos.
Yeah. So I'm okay with it. Like, I understand why maybe some Captain Marvel fans are really upset, but I thought it was good that she was present and her power was there, but she didn't upstage anyone.
Yeah, she was in it like just enough. Because I think if you had her movie came out 2 months ago.
Yeah.
I think. If you had this person who was introduced to the MCU come in 2 months ago and just be the one who solves everything, that just undercuts all the rest of the people who have been here for 11 years. So.
That said, I really liked Thanos' reaction to the headbutts not working at all.
Yeah.
And she did
the look of absolute terror.
I'll tell you what though, like if there was a weak link in this movie for me, it was actually Thanos. Because in Infinity War, I think he shapes up as the best MCU villain. Like they gave that character a range of depth and feeling that I was not expecting. He was Thanos in Infinity War got more screen time than I think any other character actually. That movie was more about Thanos.
He's pretty much the protagonist in Infinity War.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. And you saw sides of that character that I don't think any of us were expecting. As fucked up as his motivations were, like he thought he was genuinely trying to help the universe out. Like he thought that he was a savior. He felt like he was doing, and he didn't want to rule the galaxy. He didn't want to. When he snapped, he went back to this farm and he retired and he destroyed the gems because he didn't want to be tempted to use them again. He was like, my work is done. I've saved everybody. But Thanos in this movie, past Thanos, is just obsessed with power, and he even says it. He says, he's like, you know what? You've convinced me that, what I've been trying to do is wrong. Instead, I'm just going to fucking rip everything apart and rebuild everything in my image. And, I'm going to, and it was just like it was your standard evil villain plot stuff. And it wasn't like bad per se, but compared to his motivations and characterization in the first movie, I found it lacking.
But that's the point. Endgame Thanos shows that all Thanos are absolutely full of shit.
Yes, I actually really like it because I wasn't a fan of the reaction to Infinity War that was like, Thanos, finally an empathetic villain. It's like, no, he's killing
No, he's not empathetic.
He's fucking
no.
insane.
But
Yeah, he's nuts.
I heard people saying he's empathetic and like, oh, I can understand him, I can sympathize with him, and I like that this movie kind of like can't like pulled it back and was like, no, maybe he can't, like his motives were like reasonable seeming, but like the root of it is he's just power hungry. He just wants people to bow to him. And
well, and that's
this
the thing.
was just a justification.
Well, and for me,
doing this,
for me, it worked too because, like, you know, it was past Thanos, and like the Thanos in Infinity War, you know, especially post snap, would not have lined himself up in a way that we could get that big final battle with everybody or anything. So by having it be, you know, Thanos from a few years before he had really fully set his plan into motion, before he had really thought everything through, and really had like embraced the weight of what he was doing, I think it worked.
yeah, and
for me,
I do too.
it's very distinctly a different Thanos than the one from Infinity War.
yeah, well, and like not to make it political, but I think we see this in a lot of politicians that they say like, oh, we want to help people, like we want this, we want that, and like the root of their motivation is just more power, more like people being like, oh, you're so great, you're so great. And that's what Thanos is. Like he's like, oh yeah, I want to help people, but actually I really just want people to look up to me and like think I'm great.
Well, and you know, that's following the archetype of almost every dictator that's ever been on Earth. You know, it's like, I present myself as a savior, but what I really want is power. I just miss that. I thought Thanos as a character, like, because I got the sense that he convinced himself that his motivations were altruistic in Infinity War, and I felt like that was a really interesting way to present that character. Because in the comic books, in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, he was just trying to make Death fall in love with him. You know, he wasn't an environmentalist, basically, like he was in Infinity War. He just wanted to get in Death's pants. That's literally what his motivation was for wiping out half the universe.
This was so much better than that.
I agree completely. Yeah. I agree completely. But yeah, like, and again, like, it wasn't bad. It just, like, I felt like there was some nuance and characterization there in Infinity War that I really liked, and it wasn't here. So
I think it might play better watching Infinity War and Endgame back to back.
It might,
because you won't, like, Endgame does feel like he doesn't have a ton of screen time, but like
he really doesn't.
If you're coming right off of Infinity War and having all that characterization, and then you jump right into
which I'm absolutely doing that this year, by the way. Those movies are getting watched back to back.
And I remember when
because like you'll see that version of him on his farm, and then you'll get it juxtaposed with the version before he came up with his environmentalist spiel.
And I remember that conversation when Infinity War came out, and even on this podcast we talked about it. There were a lot of characters that didn't get much screen time in Infinity War. Captain America hardly has a line. And I remember the Russos promised we gave more attention to Black Panther and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and stuff in Infinity War, and there's a reason. It's because we're going to show you the other side of these characters in Endgame. And same goes for Thanos. So I
also
feel
because none of those characters are barely in it.
But yeah, it was very deliberate, and I think the balance, and again, like you said, watching them back to back, I think we'll appreciate it a lot more. I think the balance is very good, where you get this side and this view and these people in this movie, and then you get the other half. There are two halves of a whole.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to comment on, because like I'm not quite as high on Infinity War as most people are. I mean, I still like it. I don't think it's bad or anything, but like, I wasn't as big of a fan of it as a lot of people seem to be. But I really want to watch these two movies back to back, because I really do think that they are, you know, very deeply entwined, as much as they are entwined with the rest of the MCU. So I'm really curious to see what that back to back watch is like.
Yeah, well, remember when they were announced, it was Infinity War Part 1.
It was Part 1 and
2.
Part
1 and 2,
I think when they renamed Part 2, people thought they would be a little more disconnected, but they're still definitely play as Part 1 and Part 2.
It feels like one movie. It does. I've got a question for everybody, because I've been actually kind of rolling this around in my head ever since I knew that we were doing the Pause for Popcorn today, Jeff. So Jeff, as long as it's all right, I'd like to pose a question to the group. Just a quick one at the end. So, obviously, Steve Rogers goes back and he replaces all the Infinity Stones and Mjolnir apparently, and goes back to live his life. And they say that earlier in the movie, Hulk established that the past can't affect the future, because if you go back into the future, and but he set all the rules down, right? But when Cap goes back to the past, he pops up in the current timeline as an old man, and the way that Hulk explained it doesn't really jive with that.
So.
Because he said, look, we talked about alternate realities and stuff, and I'm like, okay, so if those are the rules, then how is Cap? How is this Captain America still in this timeline?
I struggled with that, and I paid very close attention on my second viewing, and I think I figured it out, but we can discuss it. And it makes sense. So if you pay attention, when Cap goes back in the 70s, he grabs 4 vials of the Pym particle. He only needs 2. He only needs 1 for him and 1 for Tony. So he has extra Pym particles. Now, the way they explain it in the movie, so there's a couple things that people were confused about. One is when the Ancient One talks about these dark branches. She's only referring to dark, kind of hopeless timelines where the stones have been removed. And they're saying putting them back will correct those. It doesn't mean that putting the stones back corrects all the timelines. You still have branching timelines. It just means there's no dark ones that are entirely doomed. They still have hope, but things can play out differently. So let's go back to Captain America. His time is a straight line. Nothing he does can change that. There's the beginning of his life and the end of his life. It's a straight line. No matter what, he goes back in time, does this, does that. Those are all continually part of his future. So when he goes back in time to live with Peggy, for that version of Cap, that's his present. He's going back in time, but he's not going back in his own past, if that makes sense. So he lives his life with Peggy, and a lot of people think he lived his life with her and then just strolled back over to that bench, which, correct, would not make sense because he'd be in an alternate future. What he does is lives his life with her, then goes back in time all the way to when he initially left on the platform using the Pym particles and his bracelet, and shows up on the bench at that exact time. So he goes back to his own past.
Yeah, there was an interview with the Russo brothers where they said it's like timelines. He's not going to the main MCU's past. He's going to a past like in a different time.
He branches off when he... Sorry, go ahead, Dio.
Which is funny because both the writers and the Russos disagree on what exactly happened with Cap. For the Russos, it's an alternate timeline. For the writers, he was always Peggy's wife. Or Peggy's husband.
Huh.
So then, did he make out with his niece in Civil War?
Sure did.
Yes.
So
Gross Cap.
Yeah, for me, it works so much better if I just think about it as it's so much easier to understand and makes so much more sense to me if I think of it as just 2 alternate timelines. There's the main MCU timeline that we all know, and then they got they all went to the same timeline where they got the Infinity Stones, and that's the one that Cap went back to return them and then lived with Peggy.
Yeah, he branched off when he went back with Peggy, and then all he did was go back in time to when he branched off and return to the original timeline. Even if it disconnects with what some of the writers have said, I feel like that makes the most sense. He can't... When you guys joke about him like making out with his niece, there's the way they establish it where your past cannot affect your future. He could not possibly he couldn't have gone back and it doesn't make sense. I don't know how else to describe it.
It's the only way it makes sense.
Yeah.
If it's
Back to the Future is bullshit. That's the rule of the movie.
Also, I think
parallel timelines.
I think at the end of the day, like what I ultimately decided was, you know what, I'm worrying about this in a movie with giant purple Titan men with double-edged swords and in reality altering stones. Like, I'm just going to turn my brain off on this one.
But also, what's more important, like the drama of the moment or
exactly,
technicalities behind
the rules.
It's comic book and magic. Like, you can explain it a million different ways. Sorry, go ahead, Jess.
The one criticism I heard of that also it being two alternate timelines makes more sense for is that people were like, well, does this erase everything, Peggy did on her own without Cap, to just make her, like his reward at the end of the storyline. And like, by having it be two alternate timelines, like we still get the badass Peggy from like Agent Carter and stuff that did everything on her own, as well as another Peggy that lived with Cap.
Yeah, because she still needs to have done all that stuff to get to the point where Cap can go back. So.
To make out with his niece.
I guess, does anyone want to talk about Loki? There's a timeline where Loki's just out there?
Yes,
he's out there somewhere.
That's got to be a tie-in for his Disney Plus series, right?
Yeah, see it in 2020 on Disney Plus.
That would be a clever way to do it. Although I want to point out real quickly, everyone thinks it means Loki lived, but when you think about it, even in that timeline, Thanos is probably still trying to collect all the gems, so it's very possible he still just finds Loki with the stone and kills him.
See, I've been thinking about that, and I think it would be really cool is like, because in that timeline, it's not too far later when their Thanos gets killed. So I think it'd be really interesting if that was Loki trying to fill that power vacuum and collect the stones and gauntlet and stuff for himself in that timeline.
That'd be neat.
What I'm curious about is to whether or not they will change Falcon and Winter Soldier to Captain America and Winter Soldier, because Falcon is now Captain America.
I don't think they're going to.
He's taking up the mantle.
I think it's going to be like at the end of that, like he's probably like, the series is probably going to be like, oh, I don't feel comfortable being Captain America after Steve, and then at the end he finally like fully becomes Captain.
It's gonna be like all those DC shows like Smallville and Gotham, where like you just wait the whole series and the last shot is him in the
like
costume.
10 seconds of him in the costume.
Yeah, I think Falcon's arc in that show is going to be him struggling with taking on the mantle, because he had that little like, are you sure? Like, I don't really, doesn't feel like mine thing. And a lot of people were kind of critical of like, oh, Sam, like Bucky should have been Cap because Sam didn't really have that much interaction with him. And I think that this series is probably a good lead to him.
I was surprised. I was surprised that Bucky didn't get the shield simply because chronologically he gets the shield before Sam does in the comics, but it could have gone to either one.
But also, think about the public perception around.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, an assassin.
Around passing it to yet another white man. Yeah, I agree.
No. Like in the MCU. Like, if you watch Civil War, like, people know who the Winter Soldier is. They know what he's done. Like, they
do
would not accept him.
Imagine Captain America. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm also glad they gave it to Sam, just because I didn't necessarily want another straight white man as Captain America. Like, let's move on from that and try something else. So that's why I like it going to Sam.
While we're on the Bucky Sam thing, there's very few weaknesses, I think, in these movies in terms of characters. I was disappointed in Infinity War, and Endgame still let me down with regards to Cap and Bucky's relationship. Rewatching the first Avenger, that friendship and bond is so strong, it makes sense that it's fractured in Winter Soldier and to an extent Civil War. But I was really hoping to get a little bit more closure. I feel like, and I think the directors acknowledge that it's hinted at, that Bucky and Steve had some sort of conversation because Bucky knows he's going back and not coming back for a long time. But I feel like we needed to see another conversation with the two of them. And maybe it's just too much damage has been done, too much. But I never felt like I got a really good sense of closure with their relationship and their friendship. Does that make sense?
Well, no, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, Jeff, because like Bucky definitely hinted at the end. He's like, "I'm going to miss you," whereas Sam and Hulk were like, "See you in a few seconds."
Yeah.
But Dio, you had your finger up, man. Go ahead, dude.
Yeah. I want to argue something. Like, I would have liked to see a scene that, like you said, Jeff. But I think when Hulk Banner didn't get his character development in this movie as he should have, we just time skip and he's Professor Hulk. I don't really think we would really had seen Bucky talking with Cap because of that.
Well, that's the other thing is about Hulk is that and this just kind of struck me, Dio, but he didn't, like, for being the Hulk, I don't remember him getting like a single I don't really remember any of his fight scenes from the movie. Like all of Hulk's scenes were kind of goofy or talking or figuring out time travel or snap or putting the gauntlet on and snapping. But I don't remember him. Like I know he was there at the final battle, but I couldn't tell you what he did.
He just kind of held up some of the debris for like the other guys.
That was about it. Yeah,
underneath the Avengers.
Didn't he hop in and fight Thanos at one point?
No,
when,
he
like,
never.
Everybody was ganging up on him.
Maybe for like a couple hits, but not like.
I don't remember him fighting Thanos.
I kind of wish he'd gone in and.
Yeah, there wasn't a big like Hulk out moment.
There wasn't. Yeah, but I mean, I guess that's because he was already Hulk, right?
And just due to the structure of the movie, there's actually not really any fight scenes until the final act. So yeah, maybe he didn't have his moment right at the end there.
Although I did love seeing Cap versus Cap. That was great.
When he calls himself out on his, I could do this all day, because I thought they were gonna.
Yeah, I know.
I thought they were gonna use that again, and the way they just kind of made fun of it was so self-aware and hilarious.
I'm glad they didn't do that at the end, by the way, Jeff. I'm glad he didn't look at Peggy and say, "I could do this all day." I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad they didn't do that. I was waiting for it too. I was like, he's gonna say it, but then he just kissed her. I was like, okay, good.
This is why you're not a screenwriter.
I'm saying I'm glad they didn't do it. I'm relieved they didn't do it.
That would have been the worst thing ever.
That would have been terrible.
Yeah, there were a lot of callbacks and nods, and I think it's a really tough line to walk between being too on the nose and giving just enough to reward you, and I feel like they nailed it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matty.
It all just felt like very earned, which I think is again the 11-year buildup.
What else is interesting is I think this movie definitely hinted that Cap was fully capable of picking up the hammer in Age of Ultron, but chose not to. Because Thor said, "I knew it," and he knew that Cap was worthy. I think Cap was aware. He was like, "Oh shit, I can pick this hammer up," but he didn't want to. That's the distinct impression I get from Endgame is that Cap was worthy all along.
Yeah, I will say. Sorry, it doesn't really answer your question. Just on the topic of the hammer, it was kind of weird in that it kind of contradicts Ragnarok a little bit when Odin basically tells Thor, the hammer isn't your power, it just helps you focus it, and then Cap wields it and is like summoning down lightning and shit like that.
He's getting lightning.
Yeah,
go
ahead. Dude.
That's because the Mjolnir grants whoever is worthy the power of Thor.
So Cap has the power to. Okay.
Has the power of Thor.
Ragnarok contradicts the earlier movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and also, I mean, Ragnarok. You see a mural of Hela holding Mjolnir, and I was like, how the hell was she ever worthy?
Well, I also just kind of take that line from Ragnarok as like just a father-son, like. You're still powerful. Like
the real power's in here. Yeah.
Yeah, just a pep
talk. At the end of the day, the real Avengers were the friends we made along the way.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
One other thing I want to say, and I'm so glad Dio's here because he was on my Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast I did. We didn't get a scene of the ship with all the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents blowing up and killing them. But we had our first TV MCU cameo, and it was Jarvis from Agent Carter.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was Jarvis. It was so amazing because I love James Darcy. I love that character and the relationship with Peggy, and it was just so unexpected. It wasn't any Netflix characters. It wasn't the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. people. It was Jarvis from Agent Carter. I just have to give that a shout out. That was
cool. I noticed that too. That was cool.
Also, Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck was in the final battle. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
You didn't know that?
When Hope lands, or the first time they reveal Hope's back, there's a group of Ravagers, and you can see him Howard tucked behind her.
Yeah, he's got a big energy cannon.
What the fuck?
I love it.
He's wearing his maroon suit and everything.
I wonder how many other little cameos like that could be hidden in that theme. Especially when everybody's coming out of the strange portals, there's probably way more than just.
We need some 4K freeze frames.
M'Baku was there. Did you guys catch M'Baku?
Yeah, I saw him.
Yeah,
I saw him charging.
Like blink and you miss him, but you see M'Baku when they're charging towards Thanos' army for the first time. He's out front. That's the only time you see him too.
But before we move on, I also, since we're talking about the final battle, I want to address the kind of female team up shot. I've seen some people complain that it's pandering, but I'm also, which
it was so good though.
The entire movie is pandering to MCU fans.
Yeah.
It's just this one scene is pandering maybe to people that aren't specifically you. So, like, what is the issue with just having a fun moment?
When
I think
especially since like they were stepping in like for Spider-Man and stuff. Like, I don't know, it was just, I loved that scene. Like, I know it's, you know, kind of a pandering thing, but like there's a lot of new fans of Marvel stuff that are women, and like I'm sure they loved that scene. Like, we haven't really gotten a big women team up in
Vicky
the
loved
MCU
it. Like
yet.
Vicky was freaking out. She loved that scene. And besides, like Jeff said, like Cap getting the hammer was pandering to the nth degree. I mean, like, that was the ultimate pander. Like, Cap picks up Mjolnir and beats the shit out of Thanos with it. Like,
despite never wielding a hammer before.
If you want to pander to me, that's how you do it. You have Captain America pick up Mjolnir. So, like Jeff said, the whole movie was, the entire MCU is pandering to comic book fans. So people can get over it.
The one thing I'll say about that is I don't think, like, the people who were like annoyed about it weren't the people who like hate Brie Larson or whatever.
No, I wasn't trying to imply that.
No. But like, I saw a few people who took issue with the fact that like it's kind of like, oh, look at how much diversity we have. Look at how many women we have. When like there's been one solo women movie. The criticism I saw was that they didn't exactly earn it, which I think can be remedied by them earning it in the future.
Yeah,
well, I do think like, you know, Spider-Man handing off the gauntlet to them and them kind of taking over was kind of a statement about the future of where the MCU is going to be going. They've made statements saying that diversity is very important to them going forward.
Yeah, I'd love to see like a Kamala Khan movie.
I want to see a Valkyrie movie.
Not
like a Thor movie.
For sure, we haven't seen the last of her.
Yeah.
Just
she'll be in Thor.
Just to follow up on what Matty said, I think I agree. The problem isn't with the scene itself. Like you said, it hasn't earned it, and I think that's fine. I don't think it needs to earn it. I think it's more that scene is just a reminder of how much they missed the mark with their female characters up until now. So it's almost like, well, this is great, but like, where the fuck has this been for the last 11 years? And then the salt in the wound is that the original female Avenger, Black Widow, is literally dead on the ground in Vormir and isn't even in that final charge.
That really bugged me that like she didn't get to be a part of that.
Yeah,
and Pepper got to be in it with which like Pepper has
rescue armor.
Yeah,
and Pepper hasn't used the armor ever before.
I did really like that though.
Yeah,
I mean it was cool, but like it was just.
Well,
like,
they tease it in Iron Man 3 when she's in the armor, and knowing Tony, I can easily see a scene where he's just like paranoid about everything and paranoid about the end of the world, and like teaches her like, you need to protect her if I'm gone.
I mean, it almost felt like she was there instead of Black Widow because, you know, Pepper has been in the MCU for so long, kind of thing. That bothered me more, not that, you know, she was there at all.
I mean, she was the first woman in the MCU other than
she was.
the woman in the Jeep in the intro scene of Iron Man.
Oh, right, yeah.
And talking about the women in the movie, I really, really loved Nebula's arc in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Nebula was really good in this.
Yeah, when I love the symbolism of her killing her past self.
Yeah.
Separating herself.
Let the past die.
Yeah, exactly. Literally.
Yeah. It was... they've kind of been setting it up in the Guardians films. I thought Guardians 2 was like a nice step forward for a character, but I was surprised in a movie like this for her to get such a focus and to see the relationship with her, even though it's past Gamora, to see the two of them kind of reconnect there. And it makes me really excited for what Guardians 3 is going to bring.
Like her relationship with Tony at the beginning of the film, really cool too.
Yeah, the next Guardians movie is going to be interesting considering that, you know, Gamora's back in play, but it's not the Gamora that they know.
And also Thor's on the team now.
Thor's on the team, so like
didn't that Gamora go back or something? Because I didn't see her with them at the end.
No.
I missed it the first time, and then if you look when they're on the ship at the end, there's a screen up that says "searching," and it's got her face.
Searching for her. Yeah. She's still in the current timeline. So I guarantee you, the next Guardians movie, like, is part of it's going to revolve around finding Gamora.
Oh yeah, definitely. Which I almost wonder if that leaves the door open for Black Widow to come back or something.
It
I don't know.
won't, it won't, and
the Soul
I hope
Stone
they,
is a weird.
It is,
thing.
but I hope they don't. I'd love to see her back, but I hope they don't, simply because I think like she was, like, whether we like it or not, she was sacrificed, and that would she wasn't brought back in the snap for a reason, because it would cheapen her death. And if you brought her back after that, then her death is meaningless.
And I was so happy with this movie that they didn't do that. The people that died, Loki, Heimdall, Gamora, technically, Vision, like people that died stayed dead, and I think that's important and makes those
it gives
meaningful.
their death meaning, right, Jeff? Like it because like if you bring them all back with the snap, then that like if there's no stakes, then nothing has any weight to it.
Yeah, no, I like, and that was my big question is like, we knew that the snapped people were coming back, but it was if not the people that died to Thanos that weren't snapped would, and they didn't, and I think that was a good decision.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll wrap it up with kind of where we think the MCU is going now. I think most of us would be in agreement that they will give the big event, overarching villain stuff a bit of a break, kind of get back to basics and focus on some of the newer standalone characters. We know they have a couple of new solo movies in the works. One of them, I'm sorry, it's an Asian character. I can't remember the name.
Shang-Chi.
Yeah, and Eternals, I think, is rumored as well. So there's a lot of new stuff coming. We know
Eternals is confirmed.
Doctor Strange 2, Black Panther 2, Guardians 3. So some of the old blood coming back.
And Eternals is going to feature the first openly gay MCU superhero.
I hope so, because I appreciated
Hercules.
what they did with the Russo cameo in this one, but it was like, he's just some, I don't know.
Some
This
guy.
guy, like,
they shouldn't have mentioned it in the press run or like the.
Oh.
Yeah.
this is your openly gay character. Some guy went at a support meeting, went on a
Yeah,
date.
Don't brag about it.
And the fact that like because the thing is like I didn't realize the first time when I watched it, that it was one of them too. Like I feel like if it was just the scene with an actor doing it and they hadn't talked about it in the run up and it wasn't one of their cameos, it would have gone over better. But like it seemed like they were kind of patting themselves on the back for it preemptively.
Yeah, totally.
And I think they will at some point. I mean, they're going to get back to the big overarching threat to to the MCU again, and I wouldn't mind seeing like a Kang the Conqueror, or even now that MCU, or now that Marvel owns the film rights to the Fantastic Four, pull Galactus into the mix. A character like Annihilus would work. I would love to see like Victor Von Doom introduced to the MCU as kind of like a big replacement for Loki. There are three characters basically, like Doctor Doom, Loki, and Red Skull, that represent kind of like an existential threat to the entire Marvel universe. And I feel like Doctor Doom would fill those shoes really well.
Given how much they talk about the earthquake, the big pulse of energy because of the snaps, I think they're starting to plant some seeds for the X-Men.
I agree. I agree with that, and I think the earthquake in the ocean was a direct reference to Namor, probably. So I feel like Namor, the Submariner, is a definite possibility for the future. There is a lot they can do. Like Cap and Iron Man may be gone, but there's still a lot of depth in the MCU. I mean, it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
I think what excites me about the way they seem to be going is, they've dipped their toes into pulling some more, obscure characters in. Like we've seen Strange and the Guardians, and those have become really successful. Black Panther as well. And it seems like they're really kind of going all in on turning more obscure characters into household names and making us care for them as much as we did the main crew.
Well, I mean, that's what they did with Iron Man.
Yeah.
Iron Man was a B-tier character in 2008,
So
and now he's like an A-lister.
I'm really excited to see where they go, and especially with branching off with, the Disney Plus series and stuff, since those will probably be much more connected to the MCU than like the Netflix stuff was.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see it branch out, but I am also excited to see it maybe not be as interconnected for a little while. Kind of build up some of these separate characters and threats, and then
I think it's pretty
start to weave them together again later.
I think it's pretty clear that our next big threat is going to be the Sinister Six. So I expect Spider-Man to get a lot of. And the interesting thing about Spider-Man is that we're 5 years ahead now. You could introduce Miles Morales as a classmate. Of Peter's.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I have to point out to maybe people that don't know that Far From Home is the final movie in the Sony Marvel agreement. To our knowledge, they have not extended that.
They will.
I believe they will. I believe Feige is on record as saying at one point that Spider-Man would be the future face of the MCU. And I have a feeling he would not have said that if he wasn't extremely confident. But
there was also a Sony exec fairly recently that said,
who's like, we'd be crazy to.
They don't have intentions to pull him out.
Yeah, they were like, it's never happened before, and it might never happen again after this next movie.
I think probably what's likely to happen is Sony negotiates some merchandising rights that they, gave up at some point back to keep Spidey in. They might play hardball, but I think
they're not going to let Spidey go.
I think he'll probably stay, but I think Sony might, pull some stuff behind the scenes to get more money out of it.
I think it's a 100% certainty that he's going to stay because that character, those movies are only as popular as they are right now because they're in the MCU. Like the Amazing Spider-Man movies weren't great, and they underperformed at the box office. And Sony knows what's going to happen if they remove. I mean, there's going to be a massive backlash.
And also, I think since Peter is still young in the MCU, like there's a lot of room for him to grow into like a mentor character in the long run. Which is why I don't think Miles is coming in anytime soon. I think Miles will come in eventually. I don't think he's coming in anytime soon because I think there's still a lot more to do with Peter since he's still quite young.
Clearly we don't know what happens in Far From Home, but like that, just the opening lines of that trailer is like Peter saying, like, "Oh, well, we need a new Iron Man." Like they're definitely setting him up to be that.
Give us Matthew McConaughey's Norman Osborn to do the Hammer storyline.
Oh yes,
I could get on board with that.
That would give us. I mean, as a new Iron Man. I mean, because Norman Osborn is the Iron Patriot in the MCU, not Rhodey. And I feel, Matty, you didn't know that?
No, that's weird.
Norman Osborn is the Iron Patriot, and that's when they formed the Dark Avengers. And S.H.I.E.L.D. gets shut down, and Hammer is instituted with Norman Osborn as the director of Hammer. And I would love for them to introduce Norman Osborn as kind of like another MCU big bad that could threaten multiple characters. So bring it. And I feel like Matthew McConaughey would be an amazing Norman Osborn.
One of the things I'm most excited about for the future, and I hope they do, is I've loved how they've started more organically inserting characters into each other's movies. Black Widow in Iron Man 2 was really jarring, but the Banner and Thor team up in Ragnarok. I thought Natasha and Steve in Winter Soldier worked really well together. I want to see more of these natural crossovers. You got Nick Fury popping up in Far From Home with Peter. Like, I just want to see more of this. Like, hey, it's just these characters that all inhabit this world, and two of them are just in this movie together.
I don't want to see another thing like in Ant-Man where he's like, oh, guess what? You have to, like, all of a sudden it's like, guess what? You're sneaking into the Avengers compound and now you have to fight Falcon.
Yeah.
Falcon felt like a boss fight in that movie.
Yeah.
It felt like a boss fight. But I could watch a whole series of Thor, Hulk, buddy cop movies. Like, I could just, give me all of those.
Well, we're just over an hour. Did you guys have any final thoughts? Anything else you wanted to add before we call it?
No, just I could not be happier with the way this movie turned out. I absolutely loved it. I adore this film.
Dio?
If anything, I really liked how. I'm sorry if this ends on a downer, but I really liked how Endgame recontextualized Strange in Infinity War, like his regret that he knows he's going to sacrifice Tony.
That's true, because Strange even says, when it comes to you and Peter and the Stone, like, I will not hesitate to sacrifice either one of you. And in a way, that's what he did, because he knew all along. So that's a very, very good point. I didn't consider that till just now. Matty or Justin?
I think I said everything about I wanted to say. I was just very impressed at how satisfying this movie was and how fitting of an end to some of these characters it was, and I'm excited for where it goes next.
Yeah, even like I can't believe they pulled it off, and like even on the second viewing, I got like the adrenaline shakes in the last hour, and then when everybody comes out of the portal, like I still got chills the second time. Like just that moment, the Avengers Assemble moment. I don't think anybody will top that for a very long time for like the most exciting moment.
Like I was even saying before Infinity War came out, I didn't think we were going to get that everyone all together battle until Endgame.
Yeah, it was
and so like
amazing.
it was something I've literally been expecting for years, and it still gave me like chills.
Yeah, it's definitely a testament to like the strength of their writing, their plan, their just like the consistent quality that the final, because like end of Avengers, big fight against CG gray aliens, I could not care less about that fight, but like I was 100% in on this hour-long fight against gray CG aliens.
Yeah. All right, well, that'll wrap it up. Avengers Endgame is just approaching $2.2 billion at the global box office. It'll be probably catching Avatar within the next few weeks. I don't think there's any way it doesn't reach it at this point. But make sure you guys go see it. If you've listened to this episode, I hope to God you've seen it. Go see it a second time. Soak in all the little details. There's so much going on there. And it's such a wonderful conclusion to this 22-film saga that we've all experienced over the last decade of our lives. Until then, we will catch you guys next time on for Pause for Popcorn when we review Avatar 2. Have a great night, everyone.